Hi there, it's Mirel Goldstein, and today I'm going to give you a short presentation about social anxiety. So just to give a definition to start, according to Wikipedia, social anxiety is nervousness in social situations. Individuals higher in social anxiety avert their gazes, show fewer facial expressions, and show difficulty with initiating and maintaining conversation. And the function of social anxiety is to increase arousal and attention to social interactions, inhibit unwanted social behavior, and motivate preparation for future social situations. We're all social creatures, and we're all wired to want to belong to the group and to want to fit in, and this is how we survive as a species, is we maintain a certain belonging with our social group. And the feeling of vigilance or fear about messing up or being rejected is very hardwired inside of us. But some people are more worried about it than others. Some people have a natural nature that's just a bit more anxious or shy in social situations, and some people learned this through experiences of bullying or rejection or being criticized, or parents that focused a lot on image or how people look, how they reflect on the family or the parents. These kinds of things could also condition somebody to become extra conscious of how they're coming across in social situations and to feel anxiety about this. Anxiety can actually be a healthy thing at times. We wouldn't want a person to have no anxiety about social situations or doing things that are appropriate, fitting in. There are certain behaviors that are acceptable in social situations and other ones that aren't. But it becomes a disorder when you're hypervigilant, or you're too anxious about it, or you're so anxious about how you perform in social settings that you find yourself avoiding getting into relationships or taking healthy risks or putting yourself out there at all. So here's a list of some of the experiences or feelings that some of my clients with social anxiety talk about. One is overanalyzing what they said in a social interaction. So you might be out with friends, and after you leave, you might start feeling self-conscious about something you said, or wondering how you seemed, how you performed in front of other people, or what other people think of you. Or you might go over and over what you said in your mind, trying to make sure it was perfect enough. Sometimes you might obsess about what people think of how you look or sound. So you're just really worried about what other people think of you or how you're coming across to other people. It could be a feeling of just being very awkward or self-conscious, feeling shy or embarrassed and worrying that people can tell. A lot of people who have social anxiety, on top of their anxiety in social situations, become anxious that people can see how anxious they are, so that adds a second layer of anxiety to the situation. It could be a feeling of wanting to express yourself but feeling inhibited. Maybe as a young child you were someone that could be very funny and cocky and free, and now you find yourself very tied up in knots and constrained when you're in a social setting, and you're very careful or cautious about what you allow yourself to say. You might have a feeling of embarrassment, mortification, wishing the ground would swallow you up. Or you might try to find the perfect way to say something. You might get very caught up with how your words are and whether you use the right words and whether you used a word the wrong way, or you knew exactly what a word meant, and you can get kind of literal about words and how you express yourself. And you also might have a feeling of sounding stupid or feeling like everyone is laughing at you. Now, one of the main problems with any type of anxiety disorder is that it leads to avoidance. Avoidance is when we try to stay away from or avoid situations that might make us uncomfortable, might trigger us, or might bring up feelings of anxiety, and these can often constrain our lives. If you avoid a lot of situations, you might find that your life is getting smaller and smaller, or that there are things you want to be able to do that you find yourself unable to do because you're too afraid. So social anxiety may cause you to avoid social situations. You may not go out. You might isolate at home. You may avoid certain parties or weddings or happy hour because you feel self-conscious about something, or you don't have a partner to bring along, or there's something about you that just feels different from other people. Social anxiety can cause you to avoid being yourself in social situations. So you might be very cautious and very careful, and it's hard for you to just be free and let people see you the way you are. You might be almost like putting on a performance in front of other people and really worrying about how your act is going, putting on an act for people. Social anxiety can also cause us to avoid relationships that involve taking a risk of rejection. So to get into a relationship, to find a relationship, to be in relationships, we have to take certain risks. Sometimes we have to show the other person that we're interested in them without knowing if they're going to reciprocate or be interested in us. Sometimes we have to share things about ourselves without knowing if they're going to accept us or be rejecting for what we're saying. Sometimes we don't know how much the other person, how much contact they want, what the boundaries are that are comfortable for them. So there's a lot of negotiation, a lot of risks, and a lot of having to fumble around a little bit until you see what works and work through maybe some awkward moments that can be part of forming relationships. And if you have social anxiety, you might have trouble with this. Social anxiety can also stop you from being fully open, vulnerable, and honest with other people. You might feel like there are parts of yourself you have to hide, that it's not safe to show the full you, or there's parts of yourself that if people would know about it, they wouldn't accept you. And social anxiety is really tough. So I want you to know you're not alone, and this is hard for everybody who has it. This is a really hard experience. Uncertainty is another thing that goes along with most anxiety disorders. People with anxiety have a very hard time with not knowing, not being in control, things that are ambiguous. So you may have trouble in social situations if you don't really know what's expected of you, or you don't know what the other person wants, or you don't exactly know the rules, or you can't read the other person's expression or what they're comfortable with. Those might be very stressful for you. Phone calls can feel harder than in-person interactions. I think one of the reasons is because it's harder to read social cues over the phone. So yes, if you hate phone calls, you may have social anxiety. You don't necessarily have it, but you might. This is very, very common. And not knowing how someone else feels about you can also cause you to imagine the worst in your head, where instead of accepting that you really just don't know what the other person thinks or feels, you end up trying to fill that in your imagination, and sometimes you fill it in with things that are not pleasant. Oh, they must not like me. They don't care about me. I just made a fool of myself. And really, you actually don't know if anyone's thinking that at all, but you're just kind of filling it in with your own mind. And sometimes waiting for a response from someone can cause a lot of anxiety, not knowing what's the other person thinking, why are they not answering me, did I say something wrong? People with social anxiety have a really hard time with that. It could be a text message or an email that you send to somebody. If they don't answer, you can get quite anxious about that. And if you have social anxiety, there may be certain beliefs that you have about yourself or others. You may believe that others are viewing you under a microscope, which is really what you do to yourself. You look at yourself under the microscope. You look at every little detail. Did you mess it up? Were you just right? How do you look to other people? And you may imagine that other people are doing the same to you, and actually maybe they're not doing that at all, and they just take you as you are, or barely notice something you said at all that feels so important or big to you. Social anxiety could sometimes lead people to feel very transparent, like others could see right through them and know just how anxious they are. It could be a feeling of being very raw, and like people can really just being very exposed. I guess that would be the right word for it. And social anxiety can also cause you to believe that relationships will be draining and you won't be loved once the other person gets to know the real you. So you believe that you have to put on a show for people, or hide certain parts of yourself, or only show certain parts of yourself in order to be accepted. And you may believe that people are judging you much more than they actually are. People may actually just be taking you as you are or accepting you, but in your mind, there's this fear like you're always kind of under the microscope being judged and somehow being exposed or at risk of being exposed to other people. So here are a couple ways to cope if you have social anxiety. One is to try to focus on people who are interested in you and emotionally available, rather than trying to impress people who don't seem that interested in you. So if there's somebody that you're idealizing or looking up to or trying to get their attention, and they never really give you a straight answer, or they give you mixed messages, or they don't really seem that interested in you or like they're going to reciprocate, if you get obsessed with that, it's going to reinforce your view that other people are unavailable and rejecting. So it's much more useful to direct your mind to people that maybe are a little bit less exciting to you, but are more available, and that give you the feeling and the knowledge that they're interested in you, so that you don't have to worry so much about being rejected. Make a list of qualities you have that make you desirable to others, and look at this often, right? The social anxiety makes us very hypersensitive to what we're doing wrong or how we're not going to measure up or what others are not going to like about us. And often we have a lot of desirable qualities that if we focus on them, we could feel really good about ourselves and also project more confidence, which people are going to also respond to. And there are some coping statements that you can use to talk yourself through your fears of rejection. You can tell yourself, I can handle rejection. Someone else's opinion of me doesn't define me. Rejection says more about the other person than it says about me. Rejection is hard, but I'll get through it. So sometimes using these self-talk statements that help you cope and remind yourself that you can survive even if you get rejected can help you take some of those risks that we talked about, so you don't have to be in avoidance all the time. Now, most of you have probably heard of exposure therapy. Exposure therapy basically means that when someone has anxiety, they expose themselves or put themselves in the situation that makes them anxious until they get desensitized from their avoidance and they stop feeling like they can't handle the thing that they're afraid of. So you can do this with social anxiety as well. You can take risks in social situations and practicing risk-taking, healthy risk-taking, can teach your brain that it's safe to not be in control all the time, not know all the time, and to just be yourself in social situations. So here are some things you might want to try. You might want to try leaving the house without makeup or in clothing that you feel self-conscious in. You might try saying something you think sounds stupid every now and then and just being free and letting yourself say it. Being too needy with someone. A lot of people with social anxiety get really anxious about being too needy. The other person's going to push me away. So maybe just be free and let yourself be a little bit more pushy or needy than you're used to. I don't mean in an aggressive way that doesn't respect the other person, but in taking a little bit of a risk, maybe the other person's okay with it. And let people know you're feeling nervous. This is a really good one. If the minute you tell people, hey, I'm feeling really anxious, it takes a huge pressure off of you because you no longer have to pretend or make it look like you don't feel anxious when you do. And trying to look like you're not anxious when your body is feeling anxious is really, really stressful. So if you get comfortable just telling people, hey, I'm anxious, and not feeling like that makes you weak or there's something that they're going to judge about that, that could be hugely liberating. Another thing is to try speaking freely without worrying about how you sound to others. Just be from the inside out. Speak from inside yourself and don't focus so much on how you look to other people or sound to other people, but just focus on expressing yourself. And also getting worked up or passionate over a topic and letting it show is sometimes something that people with social anxiety have trouble with as well. So that's something you may want to practice also. Now, I want to just say a little bit about how therapy can help with social anxiety, and different therapists use different techniques, but I'm just speaking from my own experience. Some of what I do to help my clients with social anxiety is I really push them to take risks in the therapy relationship, to tell me things about how they're feeling, how they might be feeling about therapy that seem really scary or that they're afraid I might judge them for. I really encourage them to take a chance and to speak about those things. Your therapist should encourage you to be yourself and to speak freely. At least that's my opinion of what a therapist should do in this situation. And I like to encourage my clients to be more free. And a lot of times the first time a client with social anxiety hears themselves say something that's maybe more free than they're used to, maybe they express anger or they ask for something or something just comes out that they didn't plan to say, that's a really great experience because it's actually a way of practicing being open, being free, and taking some of those risks. Therapy is also a safe place to learn to tolerate awkward silences, feeling embarrassed, and worrying about being judged. A lot of people in therapy get very nervous about there not being any silence. They feel like they have to have something prepared to say, and they have to keep the whole conversation smooth, and the therapist is going to judge them if they see something wrong. So therapy is a safe place to test that out, right? To get to test out the experience of, well, maybe your therapist is not judging you if you say something that you think sounds stupid. Maybe to the therapist it doesn't sound stupid at all. Maybe it's okay if there's an awkward silence or you don't know what to say or something you say doesn't come out right. There's no reason why that's a problem. So therapy is a good place to practice that. It's a safe place to practice that. Your therapist can also help you identify your beliefs about what he or she is thinking about you and teach you to reframe it. So you may be thinking that your therapist is judging you when really the therapist is feeling compassion, for example. So that might be an opportunity for a reframe. And therapy can also help you understand what it is you're really afraid of losing control over if you let go and let yourself be free. And it might be different than you think. And this is a little bit more about the unconscious. So most of what I spoke about in this presentation was about the conscious mind and things that we think we're afraid of consciously, but unconsciously there might be certain things that you're afraid will come out, like anger towards someone that you love, or disappointment in the parent figure that you look up to, or something about yourself that you wish for or desire that you feel ashamed of. There might be something unconsciously that's making you feel like you have to always control yourself, but really if you let this thing out, then a lot of the social anxiety might go away. So therapy is a place where you can also discover that. So if you need help or you want therapy with me, feel free to reach out to me. My website is goldsteintherapy.com, or you can find a therapist local to you, or you can just use some of the techniques of exposure therapy, and you can do that on your own, and that will work as well. And try to work on your social anxiety. Let yourself be more empowered, more free, and get liberated from all the fear. I wish that for you, and I hope that this was something that was a little bit helpful and encouraging for you if you're suffering from social anxiety. Take care.